Welcome back. We are Gentlemen United and you are in the Man Cave. In our show tonight, I'll be speaking to Wayne Harris about mentoring and apprenticeships. As always, for those watching this broadcast live on YouTube, feel free to add your comments and questions in the comment bar. Joining us tonight is Gentlemen United member Wayne Harris. Of course, you, our viewers. I'm Sean Best, and I'm your host and moderator. Hey, Wayne, how's it going?
How's it going, Sean?
Not bad. It's been a minute since we've seen you.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I've been trying to get back on. I'm glad to be on. I'm glad that you're keeping up the momentum and keeping these shows going.
Thank you, sir. Do the best I can. All right. So, yes, the show today is about mentorship and apprenticeship. And I know we've talked about this in little bits and pieces. You brought it up, actually, in previous shows. And I think it's time that we spend some time talking about what exactly mentorship is, what's apprenticeship, why they're important, and why particularly they're important for the Black community. So before I start, can I start with a couple of definitions that I found about what mentorship is and what apprenticeship is?
Sure, go for it.
Mentorship is a relationship in which a more experienced or more knowledgeable person helps to guide a less experienced or less knowledgeable person. The mentor may be older or younger than the person being mentored, but she or he must have a certain area of expertise. It is a learning and a development partnership between someone with vast experience and someone who wants to learn. Mentorship experience and relationship structure affects the amount of psychosocial support, career guidance, role modeling, and communication that occurs in the mentoring relationships in which the protege and mentor is engaged. It's a long definition, but I think that kind of encapsulates what mentorship is. Anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that someone who knows teaches someone who doesn't know, and the person who doesn't know wants to know. Okay.
So on to apprenticeship now. We're going to bounce back and forth, but just so we can get the definitions out of the way, then we'll get right to the questions. So apprenticeship is a system of training a new generation of practitioners of a trade or profession with the on-the-job training and often some accompanying study, classroom work, and reading. Apprenticeship also enables practitioners to gain a license to practice in a regulated profession. Most of the training is done while working for an employer who helps the apprentices learn their trade or profession in exchange for their continued labor and an agreed period after they have achieved measurable competencies. Apprenticeships typically last 3 to 7 years. People who successfully complete an apprenticeship reach their journeyman, a title or profession, certification level of competence. So I guess apprenticeship sounds to me to be more of a more career-oriented, whereas mentorship is more of a growth and guidance practice, or yeah, I guess practice would be the right term. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, sure. Mentorship is universal, whereas apprenticeships are specific to the trade.
Okay. All right. So tell me, I know we've talked about apprenticeship, we've talked about mentorship in the past. Why is mentoring specifically important for our young people?
Well, let's take a backstory and let me give you a little bit about why I am so involved in mentorship and how it all came about. Back where we grew up in Montreal, I was a Cub Scout. And then I became a Boy Scout. And after I became a Boy Scout, I became an Army Cadet. And after an Army Cadet, I became an Army Reservist. I like teams. I like leadership. I like being a part of something. I like dressing the part. And even to this day, when I wear my suit and tie and go downtown in whatever city I'm in, just knowing that I'm geared up for the battle I'm going to be fighting that day, be it a meeting or whatever, a negotiation, I know I'm mentally and physically ready. And I think that it's a process. And many of our Black boys are not getting access to that. No one's doing Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts now because of the number of pedophiles they've found in the system over the last 20 years. I think they were always there. Don't know if we were looking for them to the same degree we're looking for them today. I know when I went through my process, I didn't see any of that back in the 70s and 80s. but I can't say it wasn't happening. It just didn't happen to us in NDG. In 1982, a gentleman by the name of Carl Whitaker, who was a leader in the Black community in Montreal, along with Garvin Jeffers and a number of Reynold Clark and a number of Clarence Bain, a bunch of folks who went through the Sir George riots back in the 60s, when they locked themselves into the campus because they were being discriminated against and so forth. These guys came out of the 60s and early 70s, not militant, because that's a negative word, but they came out conscious. They knew the system was not working for them, and they knew that we didn't have a chance if we didn't understand the system. And they took it upon themselves to make sure that anything that was available to anybody who didn't look like us was available to us. In 1982, they formed a group of about 20 to 25 of the Black students in NDG Côte-des-Neiges, and NDG and Côte-des-Neiges for the most part. And they got us involved in the city and all the city jobs that were going on. So Parks and Rec, that were paying good money at the time. $7 an hour was good money 30 years ago. And they got us involved in that. And they had programs for different things to give us the background that we needed to have a sense of self. So if you remember Camp Lamumba, at Summerled Camp, we had the Côte-des-Neiges, the NDG, the LaSalle, the South Shore, and the West Island Black community centers. And they were all coordinated, and they had Afrocentric summer camps, again, to build our self-esteem. And then we had DeCosta Hall Summer School, which was all Black summer school, all Black teachers, all Black students. It was amazing back in the 80s. And all these things built a sense of consciousness, a sense of collectivism, and a sense of self. So when you come through that and you move the 500 kilometers to Toronto, and you see pockets like green shoots, but nothing coordinated, you're like, how is it possible that a city that's 2, 3, 4 times the size of where we grew up and has English speaking only, they don't seem to have a coordination between the groups? Scarborough does his own thing, North York does his own thing, Mississauga does his own thing, Pickering does his own thing. I said, well, they all need the same thing. They need a baseline of knowledge, and they weren't getting it. So coming from Montreal, even though it's a smaller city, we were more advanced than Toronto in many ways. They do have some great programs down here, Tropicana, the JCA, the Jamaican Canadian Association, and so forth. There are some green shoots around, but again, the coordination for the advantage they have over one language and the amount of money that's in this town, it's not as coordinated as it should be. So getting back to the topic at hand, mentorship. The reason I like to mentor is because I was mentored. I had Garvin Jeffers, who was my math teacher in grade 9, was really one of my first mentors. Carl Whitaker was another one. And these gentlemen just gave me books and told me stories about what was going on, pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial African and Black history, and let me know the deal. And you can't know the deal and then not want to teach the deal. It's selfish for you to know the deal and not give people the secret. So I took it upon myself to ensure that if I had a chance and if I had willing ears, I would unlock some secrets for some people as to why things weren't happening for them at the speed it was happening for others who didn't look like us, of equal or lesser skill.
Okay, so with that knowledge, and by the way, thanks for that backstory, because number one, I can relate to a lot of that. As a teen back in the 80s, I was a guidance counselor, camp counselor for the summer camps for the Black Community Council of Quebec. Yeah. In Côte-des-Neiges for a number of years. One was a counselor in training, and a couple of other years I was a counselor working in it was not Laval, what is it? Saint Laurent, in Saint Laurent. So yeah, we did do a lot of history, a lot of our history, not just in Canada, but the U.S. and in the Caribbean as well. So it was very, very powerful for me and for a lot of the kids that I was counseling, who I later watched grow up, get married, and have kids. Made me feel old.
No, same here.
You know.
So if you think about it, the most obvious system of mentorship right now, the most obvious is the martial arts. So if you look at any martial art, any discipline, you have white belts, and the schools are opened by black belts and above. And the white belt, when they walk in, have a full submission of their ego to someone with a belt that has color to it. Even if it's yellow, you know that person knows something you don't. And if you don't govern yourself accordingly, they're going to use that delta on you. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I know. I know from
Right.
personal experience. Yes.
Right. And life is the same way. So when you go out into the market, no one's wearing the obvious belts. And when you walk into the dojo, you can see who has the belt and you know what you're dealing with. What we're trying to do with mentorship is to give you the ability to recognize the belts when they're not wearing them. And to see where you are along the spectrum, assuming you want to be on that ladder, because not everybody wants to be on that ladder.
Right.
If you want to be on that ladder, here are the belts and here's what it means. So when you go for a black belt job and accept green belt money, it doesn't make any sense. And we've been doing that for years. And a lot of people are doing it. A lot of women are doing it. They get paid 33% less. They're black belts, but they accept green belt money. Right? And for different
So give me some
reasons.
examples of that. Give me some examples of that.
Right. So what you find is there's a discount by in my city, in Toronto. So they're going to hire a white male first and foremost if they can. If they can't, they're going to hire a white female. If they can't do that, they're going to hire a South Asian male or South Asian female. Last 15 years, it was Asian male and Asian female, but it's pivoted with South Asian and male and female. And then after that, they're going to hire a black female, and then they're going to hire a black male. So if you're a black male working in corporate North America, you're very good at what you do, because there are a lot of people that came that didn't like you before you, and you have that job. So you have skills. And some people who are going to watch this are going to say, nah, you have a chip on your shoulder. And I've heard that before. But I know for a fact that many people don't get a chance because they look like you or me or somewhere in between, because there are stereotypes attributed to that person. And whether they're true or they're not, if you don't know that energy is coming towards you, you're not aware of it, you won't know how to diffuse it. I'm not saying defend, but diffuse it. Mm-hmm. So I understand. Like the other day, I was talking to a guy. He says, "You don't have a LinkedIn profile picture." I said, "No, I don't." And he says, "Why is that?" I said, "Well, I find that when you have a picture on LinkedIn, it's illegal to have a picture on a resume. But if you put your picture on LinkedIn, you take away power that you otherwise had in the traditional resume. So I treat my LinkedIn somewhat like a resume, mm-hmm. but I don't want you judging what you hear or what you read before you see my picture. Right. I want you to see. I want you to see the writing. I want you to hear the context. I want you to hear the presentation. And then after the fact, you figure out that I'm black. Well, then now you have a challenge. It's either going to be in line with what you believe, or it's going to be out of line. But it's too late. You already know I'm a subject matter expert.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
So mentorship is about taking people through the belts, and the belts mean different things to different people. And I'm not going to debate what a black belt is for you, or in where you're living versus where I'm living. Mm-hmm. What I'm going to let you know is they're belts. Be aware of that. There are belts. Okay. 2, recognize where you are on the spectrum of belts, and recognize who has belts senior to you, and most importantly, willing to teach you what they know to get to their level. Because by the time you get to their level, they should be at the next level. Right. What I find sometimes in the black community is, if I'm a green belt and you're a yellow belt, I don't want to teach you green belt, because I want to camp out a green belt for the rest of my career. And then you become a threat to me. But if I know I'm like a vegetable, I'm ripening, there's no stasis. There's no standing still. So if I will teach you 100% of what I know, because I know by the time you get to where I am, I will have read more books, taken more courses, been mentored by my mentors, and have a higher belt by the time you get to green.
So let
And
me
that's
ask you a
the
question
goal.
on that. Right. Let me ask you a question on that note, because I did want to ask you about that. So we're talking about the example you gave just now was about, for example, you being a mentor and you're mentoring somebody else. For people who are our age, who are adults who are who have been in the corporate world for 25, 30 years and are at a certain level in their career and they're feeling kind of stagnant and they're looking for an opportunity to move to the next level, or even perhaps grow at the level that they're at. Are there mentoring programs for people who are our age, or mentoring programs specifically focused on younger people?
Yes, yes, and yes. So there are mentoring programs for anybody who wants one. And the mentoring program is simply recognizing that somebody has knowledge in an area that you have, and because you're not in competing industries or competing companies, and the person is willing to teach you, they will tell you what books to read, what courses to take, which groups to join in order for you to get yourself to the next level, because they see that you're a heat-seeking missile and they are too, and they want to help, but not everybody wants to help. Right? So there's many laws of the universe, but two are the law of abundance and one is the law of scarcity. The law of scarcity says there's only enough jobs at this money for me. So I'm not going to teach you anything because you're a competitor and I believe in scarcity and I'm not going to help you. Many of our people have that law as taught to them by their parents and their parents before them. Then there's the law of abundance. The law of abundance means there's a big enough pie for everybody. Everybody can get paid. And if you get paid, I know you're gonna try to help me. And if I get paid, I'm going to try to help you. And many other cultures do that for each other. We are still learning how to do that amongst ourselves.
Right.
So when our parents were this age, when they were living within their privacy bubble, and I say that as a term of endearment because our parents weren't having discussions, at least mine weren't they were having parties and get-togethers and having dinner and talking at birthday parties, but they weren't talking strategy about career. They were glad to have their jobs. They got, decent jobs. Hopefully they were unionized, whatever they were doing, and they just put their head down and grinded it out for 30 years, got their pensions, and now they're relaxing. We don't have pensions. We're not doing those manual labor jobs. We're doing knowledge worker type work, and we need to sharpen the saw in order to stay relevant. And there's traditional ways to do that through certifications and through more academic training. But 1 hour in the field with someone who's a savant in your area versus 5 hours in a book or 10 hours on a course, the 1 hour trumps it. You get in the car and go and watch this person do what they do, or sit in the background on a meeting like this, and your screen is blank and no one knows you're there, and you just put on your headphones and mute your phone and just listen to what's going on. I find that is the most beneficial way to learn, because it's real world, and we have to put ourselves in position to give people who subscribe to what we subscribe to. You don't have to look like us. We have to subscribe to what we subscribe to in order to get ourselves and them to the next level. So there's a program in Montreal called Each One Teach One. It was run by the West End Sports Association back in the early 80s by a gentleman by the name of Bob White. And whatever you think about Bob White was leveraging the system to make sure that his constituents got what was available from the city and the province at that time. He maximized the outcome for those kids, because otherwise no one was advocating for them. So he advocated for them, and he did what he had to do. And there's people like that all over. The Gittins brothers or Gittins family in Côte-des-Neiges and NDG, Roy and Stevette and the sisters, and these guys put together stuff. Roger McDonald, Egan, Noel, all these people who, Molly and Sandra Gill and all, Judy Gilbert, and all these people from Coronation and Northmount, Mike Gittins, all these folks, pioneers in the 70s and 80s, and they were in their 20s when they were doing this, right? Dr. Richard Eiton back in the day. So these are the people that I looked to and said, listen, these guys, they were unified. They knew that the programs are there. They wrote the grants. They did what they had to do. They put together the things, and then they were looking for succession. But because of the political climate, the people who should be there succeeding them, like you and myself, are in different cities.
We left.
And in different countries because we couldn't survive there. So mentorship is the process of getting someone from where they are to where they say they want to be, and both of you have roles and responsibilities to move that person along, and both people are committed and accountable to each other. The mentor will be there when he's supposed to be there. The mentee will be there when they're supposed to be there. I'm going to give you homework. You do the homework. We're going to discuss the homework. We're going to move on to the next lesson.
So, by the way, at the end of the show, I'd like to come back to if you have any recommendations on where people can go to find mentors, any references. If you have those, I'd like to come back at the end of the show and just talk about those quickly. And I'll put the links in the low bar for those people who want to look at mentoring programs, either for themselves or for their kids.
No problem. No problem. Again, those are geographic based, so relevancy is going to be tough. But if I'm going to start, if you're thinking United States, you can look to the HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. They should have conscious people, years 1 to 4, plus the professors who want to do something in the communities where those schools are located for the local folks. Then you can take a concentric circle, go out, and maybe you want to look at the church. And then you have other programs through a number of community organizations in your cities. And then you also have the professional athletes in the United States, which we don't have a lot of up here. But down there, most of the people who come from the various cities and whatnot are going to have foundations for wherever they grew up before they made it. And those programs are there as well. And they're always looking for people to be mentors, and they're always looking for kids to help. So the programs are available. Then if you type mentor in Google for your city, the programs are going to come up. It's not rocket science. Everybody needs volunteer mentors, big brother, big sisters, the whole 9 yards. Get your police check. Up here, we have to do a police check if we're going to work with the kids to ensure that we're not going to put anyone's children in harm's way. And you just figure out what you're passionate about and what you know. You know, if you're a black belt and you want to teach white belts, if you have that patience and that passion, then go for it. Sometimes people don't want to teach white belts. Some people want to teach green belts because they have the fundamentals. I don't want to teach a kid how to dribble, but I will help a kid know how to open himself up for a shot. So There's some coaches who want to teach you travel and teach you dribble and inbounds and outbounds. And then there's other coaches who want to work on your Euro step, on your jab step, on your step back.
Work on the nuances of the game.
Right, higher level skills as opposed to the basics. So some basics, and some people have a higher level skill.
Right.
I can do the full range, but what I'm looking for is for someone to be open. And mentorship is about trust, and mentorship is about the person who is being mentored assumes that you know what you're talking about, and you have to give them artifacts of evidence that you know what you're talking about. And sometimes that's your LinkedIn profile, sometimes it's your Facebook profile, sometimes that's just a conversation of you letting them know what you've done and having other people vouch for you, which is why LinkedIn recommendations they used to be a big deal. They seem to have fallen off the radar in the last 2-3 years as endorsements came up, and they're easy to do. But when you read someone's profile and you see what people are saying about them on LinkedIn, you can get an idea of whom you're dealing with and whether the person is a taker or a giver. And what I mean by that is some people benefit from other people, but refuse to let other people benefit from them. And it's rampant in some parts of the community. And I don't have any fix for it. I don't have any answer for it. It's their value system versus mine, and they don't subscribe to what I subscribe to.
Right.
Now, if you look at apprenticeship,
I was going to get to that one next. So, so explain to me now. We've talked about mentorship and the benefits, and particularly for the Black community and for young people. How is apprenticeship different and you mentioned earlier on, but let's get into the meat of it. Talk about the application of apprenticeship in our community.
Right. So the first thing is where they're the same is apprenticeship and mentorship are based on modeling. And modeling is the ability to look at what someone is doing and mimic that behavior. How do you tie a tie? You stand in front of your father and you mirror what he is doing and he ties a tie. How do you shine your shoes? Your father takes the shoes and shines the shoes and you follow what your father's doing. How do you ride a bike? You see other people riding, you start riding the same way. How do you play basketball? How do you break dance? How do you do anything? You look at what someone is doing at an expert level, you try to break it down into smaller chunks and you try to master the chunks. It's the same thing in mentoring, it's the same thing in apprenticeship. The difference between apprenticeship and mentorship is apprenticeship is specific to a skill. So if you go back before the industrial age and there was an agrarian society, you had a guy, his name was Smith. He was a blacksmith. His son came and saw him doing the blacksmithing and making the shoes for the horses and making the swords and whatnot, and he followed suit. You had another guy, he was a tailor, and his son would come into the shop and see him cut the cloth and see him sew it together, and he'd be a tailor. And the same thing for the girls with the sewing, and the same thing with the cooking, and the same thing with the farming and feeding the cows. How do you know to wake up at 5 in the morning? Because your father woke up at 5 in the morning. How do you know to feed the cows this kind of grass, not that kind of grass? Because your father did that. So you modeled what you saw, and you would take on the task. So you go from apprentice to journeyman. I think that the other genre that made apprenticeship popular was Star Wars back in 1977. You're a Padawan or you're a Master Jedi, and there's no in between. You stay with your Master Jedi until he says you're a Master Jedi. You don't make the decision. He or she makes the decision on your behalf based on a body of work and time served in order for you to show that you can build your lightsaber and do what you have to do.
Good example.
It's the same thing with plumbing. It's the same thing with electrical, carpentry, brick masonry, and all these things. So the master apprentice model has been there from the beginning of time. From the time they built the pyramids to now, the master apprentice model has been in place. If someone is a youth minister and someone is a pastor, you want to be a pastor, you have to follow the process to become a pastor, time served.
And you know what I've heard? I've heard that I remember reading an article. I can't remember where I read it, so forgive me, but it was talking about the fact that there are a flood of people coming out of universities now with degrees, specifically in the knowledge industry, the industry that you and I work in, so much so that there are too many people for the jobs that are available. And what's happening is a lot of the jobs that typically you just mentioned, the type of careers you just mentioned that require apprentices and apprenticeship, there aren't enough people going after those jobs anymore. And in fact, there's more demand in those fields, like doing the plumbing, carpentry, bricklaying, building, all the different skills that people typically think, okay, well that's manual labor, that's not for me. They don't get paid enough. I'd rather sit in an office under a fluorescent light with an office and a door than do something outdoors or something that was more physically challenging. But apparently there's more of a demand now, and apparently not only are those jobs in greater demand, or there's more demand for those for roles to fill those jobs, but they pay better because there's so few people going into those fields. Have you heard that?
100%. So what happens is someone comes to Canada in the 50s or 60s, has their kids, and they work with their hands. That's how they got here. And they go do whatever they do. They're a master welder, or they are a gas pipe fitter, or they're a plumber or a carpenter, and they work with their hands, and they go and they buy their house, and then they buy multiple homes because they know real estate is wealth. No matter where you come from, unless you come from a communist country, real estate is wealth, and they don't trust the banks. So they buy 2, 3, 4 houses, and they tell their kids, I do not want you working with your hands. An auto mechanic says, he fixes Ferraris. He's an auto mechanic, but he's an auto mechanic. And his hands are dirty. He says, I don't want your hands to be dirty. I want you to go to Micheal and go get a degree in law. And the guy comes out with a degree in law and says, Papa, look, I'm a lawyer. But now there's a flood of lawyers, I can't find work. So I'm going to go become in-house counsel at a company and make $1.25 when the father's making $1.75 and getting overtime and double time, right? So there's status attached with white collar, and there was no status with blue collar, and it's been that way since, I would say right after World War II. If you put on a shirt and tie, got in the car, put on a fedora, and went down to Wall Street, you were somebody. And if you were working in a pipe or in a hole, digging a hole, you were nobody. Blue collar, white collar. And that mentality is still there with our parents. But now we, who are the beneficiaries of the white collar world, and we find ourselves cycling through these companies year in, year out. The person who went to high school with us, who did not go to CEGEP and did not go to university and went straight into plumbing, he's doing okay. He's doing okay. Yep. Because just what you said, there's supply and demand. If you want to do something in your home today and 3 contractors come, they will look at your house and say, listen, the job is too small. I don't want to take it. It's $10,000. I can go somewhere else and make 50. So why would I paint your house for $5,000 when I can go paint a mansion for $50,000?
Right.
Opportunity cost. So because we force people into the white collar and the academic, go to university, do not go to college, do not go to skilled trade, there's no status there. We as immigrants want our children to have paper on the wall and wear white shirts and ties and live the professional lifestyle. And that's a great dream, and that was great in the 70s and 80s and 90s. It's not great anymore. And the information worker, if he's not client-facing, will be replaced by machine learning, artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Things. Because now my fridge is going to tell me this memory card is no longer valid. You need to go and replace it. And by the way, I placed the order on Amazon for you. And the card's going to arrive. He's going to show you a YouTube video on the screen, on the fridge door, on how to take the card out and how to put a new card in. And the service technician is done. Right. Mm-hmm. So status is what caused white collar and blue collar, and now it's rebalancing. There's a bunch of kids who can work with their hands, who are not academically inclined, who do not want to study linear algebra and do not want to code. But you know what? They can handle a hammer. They can handle a sledgehammer. They can handle a crane. They can handle, a tow motor and a forklift and a caterpillar or whatever. And he shows up and he's going to make $120,000 a year just to do that times every building that's being built.
And here's what's changing too. I mean, I was watching a video clip recently. There's the invention of 3D printing. For anybody who doesn't know what 3D printing is, you know where we're going with this. You can basically take any substance, whether it's plastic, concrete, metal, whatever the case might be, and this device will actually create layer after layer of an object where, for example, you take this mouse and it would start off at the bottom layer and just go back and forth until it basically created this entire object, three-dimensional object, using a printing device. And I saw this one where they had this printer that built houses. It built a house in a matter of hours. Built the structure of the house, what do you call it, the
foundation.
The foundation. It built the wall that would bear the weight. It made sure it was built with such precision that it would leave specific spaces for pipes, for wires. I mean, the house was built within a day, and this is a complete house with rooms and a bathroom and the whole bit. So although technology is replacing certain types of jobs, there are certain other jobs that get created as a result of this technology, and those jobs, I think, still require some degree of apprenticeship. Somebody has to operate that machine. Somebody has to repair it. Somebody has to be able to apply the upgrades. Somebody has to be there to monitor the equipment to make certain it's working properly.
Yes.
So, for example, we had coal miners up until recently. Those jobs went overseas, and our current president was insisting on bringing those jobs back. And we all know that while there are generations and generations of families who have been coal miners, that work's never coming back here. Right. So what do we do with those people? How do we get them skills so they can continue to feed their families?
Yes. So the biggest problem with America, well, one of the biggest problems in America as it relates to labor, is not the computer. it's not the robot, and it's not international cheap labor. The biggest challenge with American labor and American manufacturing is a prison industrial complex having prisoners in for-profit jails doing work for 26 cents an hour.
Yep.
That's the problem. You have 2 million people in jail working for 26 cents an hour, and they're taking the jobs to build the furniture. They're the ones who are building all the stuff and making the clothes for Walmart. You don't have to go to Bangladesh. You just go to North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
It's free labor, slave labor within the prison industrial complex, and that's the biggest threat to people in the Appalachians who are saying, well, the coal jobs aren't here and I can't find work. There's work, just go to jail.
Right.
If you go to jail, there's all the work you want. You just won't get paid fair market value for it.
Right.
So that's the narrative that no one's speaking about in America, but that's probably your biggest threat to domestic production. It's the prison systems that are manufacturing made in USA product. And it is made in USA. They're not lying about that, but it's not being made by Americans, it's made by prisoners.
Made by prisoners, exactly. Well, Americans, but Americans who don't have
Americans
rights.
in jail without rights.
Without rights, exactly.
Right.
So now let me ask you a question, getting back to apprenticeship. Have you participated in an apprenticeship program?
I would call being in the Army an apprenticeship. Right? You want to be a chief warrant officer, you start off as a private, you work your way private, corporal, master corporal, sergeant, warrant, master warrant, chief warrant. Or you go second lieutenant, lieutenant, captain, major, colonel, and then you work your way up to general. So I've been a part of the non-commissioned apprenticeship of the military.
Nice. Now, how long were you there?
Only 3 years.
Okay.
Long enough to know that
it wasn't for you?
It wasn't for me, but long enough for the Department of National Defense on my resume to get me interviews where I wouldn't get them.
Gotcha. It served its purpose.
It served its purpose.
Yeah. So now, what's the best way to find and participate in an apprenticeship program? Let's say, I'm 18 years old. I'm graduating from high school. I'm community college. I do maybe a year or two of community college or CJEP in Canada. And I don't really see myself becoming a doctor, lawyer, engineer. But I want to learn a trade. Like, where do I go to find someone who I can apprentice for?
Right. So first place, they're supposed to help you. They have the information. Whether they give it to you or not is depending on where you live and who you are. But every high school knows the streams. There's 3 streams in Ontario. There's International Baccalaureate, which is the highest stream. There's Academic, which is going to put you towards university level courses. And then there's Applied, which is going to put you towards general courses, which is going to put you towards skilled trade and or college. So the guidance counselor in your school will have that information. I was going to say white pages and yellow pages, those are gone. But if you pick your trade, there's usually symposiums for all the trades a couple of times a year in most major cities. And you'll have the plumbers and the gas fitters and the carpenters all in one room telling you why their trade makes the most sense. And again, if I've been fixing cars with my father for years, chances are I'm going to want to be a mechanic. But mechanics now require computer skills because the car is mostly computers and it's fuel injection, not carburetors. You got to do the mix of the fuel and the oxygen and so forth, and the O2 sensor and this sensor and the GPS. All these things are computers, and people are going to need those skills. So you can go to those symposiums. You can also approach the individual unions who are always looking for members. If there's one thing you'll find in the skilled trades, you'll see a bunch of guys in their 60s looking to get out with massive pensions, with jobs they've had pretty much guaranteed, unless they did something really wrong. Their jobs are guaranteed from the time you're 25 to the time you're 65. That's 40 years of working in a trade with no chance of being laid off unless something happens like a housing crisis like we had in 2008, 2009 where the wheels fell off. But you look at the growth of things like Home Depot and the, Lowe's in the States, because of all the renovation, because of the cheap money, it drove those sectors, and the spiral effect of all the different industries that benefited from that. People started buying SUVs because gas was cheap. People bought houses because houses were cheap. People started to renovate because the interest rates were cheap, right? So demand is accelerated by certain macro environmental things, but the skilled trade is always going to be in demand if the skilled trade has an eye on the future for evolution of the skill sets required. So today's carpenter is not tomorrow's carpenter. Right?
So would you say, for example, there are opportunities? I know there's been a lot of money invested in the last 8 years, at least up until recently, in green energy, renewable energy.
Yes.
And of course, that has, it expands outwards in terms of the influence it has. People want to, install solar roof, solar panels on the roofs, and
Yep.
and install all sorts of green energy technologies. So, is there, in your view, is there a lot of opportunity for people who want to apprentice and grow into an industry that's actually in its infancy right now?
100%. As governments bring in things like carbon taxes and force the manufacturers to build to higher levels of specification of energy efficiency, it's going to drive ancillary industries to follow suit. So when Tesla came out, gas was like $1.40 a liter up here. Everybody wanted Tesla because electricity was cheap. Well, guess what? Now electricity is very expensive and gas is cheap. So everybody's buying SUVs again. I think that skilled trades are always going to be in demand, but you need to see where the puck is going, as we say up here in Canada. So green buildings, energy efficient buildings, geothermal, water for cooling, pulling water from under Lake Ontario and cooling high rises up here, and they've been doing it for years. Solar panels, different solar tiles is what Tesla has now. So forget about the panels, just change your shingles with solar shingles and get the same efficiency as if you have panels. It's changing the game. So as long as you're willing to evolve, you won't be roadkill. But anybody who thinks, if you want to frame basements and frame houses with wood, as long as houses continue to be made of wood, the only reason they still are is because wood is fairly inexpensive and very sturdy. So they're still framing with wood. But what if people start 3D printing wood? And now all of a sudden the lumber industry is gone, and they say, well, they blame the government. Well, no, it's technology, and you saw it coming. We just told you we can 3D print a mouse, we can 3D print a house. You need to evolve and understand how you fit. Now, again, every city and every geo is going to be at different levels of maturity. And some cities are never going to get there, and some cities are going to get there tomorrow. So depending on the demand and the maturity and the willingness of the various jurisdictions, they'll move in that direction, but not everyone can move together.
So what you're saying is you should be prepared to move.
You need to be able to pivot, and you need to understand whether the wind is blowing in your face or whether the wind is blowing at your back. Because if the wind is blowing in your face, you don't spit. If the wind is blowing at your back, spit all you want, and it goes twice as far.
Right.
People are not reading the wind as it relates to their career. And that's probably the simplest way to say it. If you see that an industry is tightening and there's less and less jobs, and the jobs are paying what they were paying 15 years ago, same money, you're making 100 15 years ago, you're making 100 now. Something's wrong with that industry. If it's harder and harder to do the same thing, something's wrong with that industry, and that's an indication. And the wind is maybe not blowing your face, but there's a crosswind, and now you have to decide by talking to your mentors whether you need to pivot. If I am a person who works with copper and I see PVC coming in, I'm like, I weld with copper. This is PVC, it's plastic, and it's plug and play, right? No welding required. I better make an adjustment. So you're going to pivot. Millennials need to understand this. They're going to pivot not once or twice. They're going to pivot 7 times in their career. They're going to get a degree in X. They're going to do X for 5 years, and then they're not even going to do X plus. They're going to do Y, which is completely different than X, because the market demands that skill, and they have transferable skills and the ability to learn, and they're going to pivot and go. That would be seen as sacrilege to our parents. Our parents want us to get one job at one company, put your head down, and do it for 30 years the way they did it.
That's the
over.
baby boomer mantra, right?
Right. So it's over. So we're Generation X. It's over for us. We can't do it. So there's no way a millennial or a Gen X, or a millennial or a Gen Y is going to be able to do it, or Gen Z. They can't.
Right.
My son is going to graduate with a university degree in computer science. He's going to go out and code. Well, guess what? Coding is going to go the way of the dodo bird, because the computer is going to code itself. How he fits in to that shift, and that shift is going to happen within the next 10 years. Machine learning, Bitcoin, blockchain, it's all changing, right? Cash. I mean, if people are using cash 20 years from now, I'll be shocked. The only reason you're going to use cash is because you want untraceable transactions, but you still can trace the transaction if you're in any location, because there's going to be a camera following you, right? As privacy dies in the next, well, it's already dead for the most part.
It's already dead for the most part.
Right. So mentorship, your mentorship is to your advantage, because you are getting 9 out of 10 times for the price of a coffee information that's going to accelerate your career and reduce the amount of friction in your career. People change jobs and people change industries because there's friction. Things aren't happening the way they're supposed to happen. It's harder and harder and harder to do the same thing. That means there's friction there, and friction creates heat, and heat creates tension, and you have to move on.
Right.
I've seen it in my career. I've been in very few frictionless companies.
Me too.
But when I see friction coming, I ask myself, is it me?
Right.
Is it them? Is it how we're doing it? It's going to fall into one of the three veins. And I'm not going to say I'm always innocent. Sometimes, I just want it my way, and I can't have it my way, so I'll do what I have to do.
Right.
But as I age, it becomes harder and harder for people to say, I want to invest in you, as they look at your track record of dead bodies. Okay?
Right. Yes.
So,
yes.
But they want one thing. They want what you know. And sometimes they're willing to pay for it. I'm still in that category, because I'm always reading. I'm always learning. I'm always buying people coffee. They're buying me coffee. I'm going to lunch. I'm going to dinner. I'm going to networking event to figure out what's next. And of what's next, what do I align with? Is it in line with my interests? Is it in line with my skills? Because skills and interests, where they intersect, that's where the magic happens.
Right.
Here's your skills going this way. Here's your interests going this way. Where skills and interests intersect, that's where the magic happens. There's a lot of people who are depressed, and a lot of people who are not excited about life. Why? Because they have zero interest in that, but they have high skill because it pays.
I think that speaks to a lot of people. I think it speaks to a lot of people.
I would say 80% of the people are out there doing things they don't want to do because it pays. Conversation about guys taking jobs because they want the house, they want the 2 cars, they want to live in the suburbs, they want the nice things, and you just do what you have to do, put your head down. And people have midlife crisis when they can't take it anymore.
Right.
I'm not in that category, but I could be if I wasn't self-aware and always sharpening the sword, as Stephen Covey would say in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So find a mentor, find somebody who does what you say you want to do, where you have strong interest, where you have strong skill, and find that person and see if they'll sit down and they'll talk to you. At any age, because life is short, and you should be able to take some risk, calculated risk, to pivot, to try something else if it isn't going to hurt you economically long term. 6 months, a year, maybe, because you have to take a hit when you jump the fence from where you're proficient to where you're a novice, if they'll give you the chance. And the only reason they give you the chance is because they know you on another level.
Right.
Otherwise, they won't allow it to happen. And a lot of people get stuck because they can't leave where they are because they don't know anybody outside, and no one's going to give them a chance unless they know you. Right. On the apprenticeship side, people need to understand that the computer is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced, because the computer is something that's going to enable you to do higher level work, not the rudimentary work. The robots will do the rudimentary work. The robots are doing the rivets and whatnot, but the robots aren't doing the design and the programming of the vehicle. They're riveting it together, and that's jobs, unfortunately. But there's somebody who's programming and maintaining those robots, and there's somebody who's putting in the design and the higher intelligence into the vehicles to make the vehicles more efficient. Computers helping that happen, but somebody's on the creative side and on the customer-facing side. If your job is in a cubicle and you never see a customer, you're at risk. That's called back office. You want to be in the front office, because they can't outsource the front office to China. They can't outsource it to anybody anywhere else. Right. But if you're in the back office, you're at risk. And I see a lot of my banker friends doing a lot of things in the back office, and somebody somewhere is going to outsource that to a third party, and they're going to be done, and they're going to have a hard time pivoting, because again, the whole reason we want white collar in the first place is because that was the currency of the last 50 years. Right. White collar was where it's at. Blue collar was if you couldn't handle white collar.
Right.
Right.
It's coming full circle now.
It has been for a while. People just didn't want to recognize it because they dropped hundreds of thousands of dollars on the university education, and they want to monetize it.
Right, exactly. And rightly so. Right. All right, so we are almost coming up on the hour here. We've talked about quite a bit here. If there are any links, Wayne, that you can send to me to include in the lower bar, I'll be happy to put them in there for people to take a look at and give some consideration to. I'm really glad we talked about the opportunity for our young people to look at not just mentoring but apprenticeships, because we both have young men and young women that we're raising, and certainly want to give them the opportunity to build a future on something that isn't going to die in 5 years. So.
Even if it does, and they have transferable skills, they'll be fine. So I'm not Nostradamus, and I'm not going to predict the future. But even if your industry dies in the next 5 to 10 years, if you have transferable skills, the ability to get along with people, the ability to work with a team, the ability to work alone, the ability to learn, you'll be okay.
You'll survive. That's right.
Yeah. And also, being an employee is fine, but being an entrepreneur is also fine, and being a contractor as opposed to a full-time employee is also fine. It really depends on what makes sense for you. For you. And again, people only make those choices based on models. My father was an employee. I'm an employee. My son, chances are he's going to be an employee unless I do something to show him that entrepreneurship is not as scary as it's made out to be. Mm-hmm. Right? Because we're trying to invent some kind of super widget that only we have, so we can sell it and know that we're always going to have sales. Listen, someone opens up a McDonald's, someone opens up a Subway, someone opens up Papa John, someone opens up a Domino. They still make money. They're the same thing. It really depends on how you service your customers and what value you can add. You could do the exact same thing as someone else, but if you do it better, you will win. If you do it consistently better, you will win big time. The difference between Disney and everybody else, everybody has roller coasters, everybody has mascots, but Disney kind of set the bar for everybody else. And it's the same thing with Tesla, with the electric car. And GM, Ford, and Chrysler have been around for 100 years. Tesla came out of nowhere, now they're number 2. So anything can happen. You just really have to get back to what are you interested in, and that comes from exposure. So parents need to give their children opportunities to see different things. And then what are you good at? And again, you can only get good at something if you get exposed to it. Right. So we need to get our kids opportunities to play with Lego. If a parent had a choice between buying a pair of Air Jordans and buying a Lego set, I would suggest they buy the Lego set.
Yes, definitely. Your kids can buy the Jordans later when they get their first job out of school.
Right. And again, sometimes there's economic hardship and you can't, but if there were a way to get kids to play with computers, do some coding, build robots, boys and girls, I don't care, just build stuff. Change the oil of a car, change a tire,
Change the brake pads.
Change the brake pads. Do some things with your hands. And again, not because this is something you're going to do for a career, but this is just about self-sufficiency.
That's right. That's right.
You know, knowing how to use a stud finder, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Basics. Hang a picture.
Yeah, simple as that. It's funny because I had to learn all that stuff myself. Nobody taught me how to do any of that kind of stuff around the house when I owned a house in Mississauga. A lot of the minor repairs, the paint jobs, all that stuff, I had to figure it out. And this is before YouTube. So, trial and error.
No, YouTube University is a beautiful thing.
It is.
And again, because of the power of the internet, you can see what people are doing outside the box in whatever genre you choose. So some people ski, then came snowboarding, then came heli skiing, then came parachute skiing. And the guy's got these squirrel suits jumping off of, level. We're innovative people. I think that if we can get our children to read a little more, game a little less social media, a little more purposeful use of the internet, they will get great gains. Because what I'm finding is the interpersonal skills of the kids is low because they're used to LOLing and rolling on the floor and
Snapchat.
All right, so you need to be able to talk to a person kneecap to kneecap and have a conversation that adds value to both sides. And so it's becoming a lost art. And if they don't figure that out, interviews are not going to go well, and they won't even get a chance because they're going to say, you know what, you're good, but this kid over here, he can do what you do, and he has interpersonal skills. And the soft skills are being discounted the same way blue collar was discounted the last 50 years.
Right.
The reason you are where you are in life is because you have skill, but you can articulate a point in a way that people don't feel threatened and want to work with you, collaborate. Right, same exactly. For me, same for most of the people within the Gentlemen United group. That's the ability to express an idea and collaborate with people and move forward, regardless of what biases they have. If they see how they win within the context of you winning and they're okay with that, we will move forward. It's when they don't that we have challenges. And when things go well for us, they go well at a slower pace. And when things go bad for us, they go at an accelerated pace because of bias.
That's right.
So you have to understand that and then govern yourself accordingly. If no one's teaching the young brothers and sisters that, they will be frustrated and they won't understand why. But that's really that's how it goes. We win as individuals and we lose as a group. The person who's going to replace you at your company will be based on their experience with you, even though you don't know that person, but because the person looked like you.
Right.
Understand?
Yeah.
So,
all right, Wayne. So listen, man, that was very enlightening. I'm obviously going to end up watching this show a couple more times because there was a lot of information that you shared. I'm going to want to go back and reabsorb some of it. I'll probably ask you some questions offline because a lot of this is very interesting for me personally.
I'm gonna put one thing in here. It's a book I was told about by a kid who was like 22 years old. It's called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi, and Keith was a partner at Deloitte back in the day, and he wrote this book. And there's two of them, but the older one you can get a used bookstore. Very good. The second book you want to look at is The First 90 Days. This is when you get a new job and you want things to go the way they should. Mm-hmm. You read The First 90 Days. Everybody in HR has had that book on their desk for the last 10 years. And if you know what they're looking for in terms of getting those small wins, little victories in the first 90 days on the job to build credibility within a new organization, this will help map that out for you. The other book I would say is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yep.
Simply because it gives you a framework to understand yourself and understand your situation. Seek first to understand before you want to be understood. And sharpen the saw, which is what most people don't do. Sharpen the saw is that once you get your certification, you get the CPE. Keep yourself on top of the the game so that you don't get blindsided by some macroeconomic shift.
Okay, great. There's a couple of other comments. Mark Lewis says, produce, develop code, secure, repurpose, innovate with social media. Don't just consume it. I guess some advice he's giving to people who are thinking about their career.
Good point.
He's let's see. Darlene's saying energy, renewable systems all around. That's also a place we talked about. A place for people to focus.
Yep.
Let's see. Mark Lewis says career pivot, death of privacy, and cryptocurrency are mega trends with long-term implications.
Yes.
So those are great opportunities there for people to look at. And I think those are the majority of the comments that we had come in. Guys, thank you for participating and sharing your comments with us. We always like to hear your feedback and your ideas. So thanks for joining and sharing it with us. Okay, Wayne, I'm going to get ready to wrap up here. Anything else you want to say before I wrap up?
Tell people to join Toastmasters to learn how to express an idea.
I need to do that. That's right here.
Okay.
I definitely need to do that. Okay. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
All right. If you have any other discussion topics that you would like to see us tackle, please tweet or comment your ideas in the YouTube feed or tweet at Gentlemen Unite 6. Please like, share, and subscribe by clicking the icon right here. If you enjoyed the show and want to see more, click here. Thanks again for joining Gentlemen United in the Man Cave.
Enjoyed the show? Like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for joining us in the Man Cave.